Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, April 28th, 2025, episode 373, and we're going to talk about being anti-war and pro-military at the same time. So clearly, I am anti-war. And I just wanted to clarify a couple of things with the standalone episode. I have been talking a lot about peace, being anti-war, and how all of this foreign adventurism is just really a bad idea. But I am anti-war because war in general is a diversion of resources, but it not only is it just simply a diversion of resources uh, for less better things, but it's for things that destroy, which so ultimately it creates even more damage than the amount of resources that went into creating all of those weapons. So in a way, war is worse than green energy, because there, at least, there is some energy that is produced. Now, I'm not an expert on all wars, but every time I scratch the surface of some of these better known wars, it's more complicated than what we probably learned in school. And so I think that the burden is on the person who is pro-war to prove that there was absolutely no alternative to all of the killing and destruction. In other words, it's not my burden to sort of show that not going to war is a better idea. I think the burden is on all those people who want to destroy and kill to convince me that, yeah, we should do this. The past is the past, but moving forward, we really should start taking that attitude. Uh, George Washington's desire for the United States not to have any entangling alliances, it's coming to a head right now. Uh, if we were invaded, then yeah, we have a right to defend ourselves. At least all things considered equal. But if the United States does engage in some kind of global crime greater than it already has, I guess, or even that the United States becomes so weak that other people start taking jabs at the United States, well, depending on who's doing the jabbing, I guess, then one could make the argument for defense. And so people have always come at me because I am of Korean descent. They'll say, "Oh, what about Korea?" Well, what about it? What do people even know about the history of the police action in Korea between 1950 and 53? Most people start the history from 1950. North Korea invaded South Korea. But if you go back, uh, let's see, 40 years, the United States looked away when Japan annexed Korea in 1910. And the reason why it looked away and did not say anything about it was because the United States was busy taking over the Philippines. So, or basically that was the arrangement. Okay, we don't say anything when you took over the Philippines, so you don't say anything when we take over Korea. Most Koreans all tell that history, and they put the blame at the feet of the United States. That if the United States did not look away in 1910 or say something about it or try to negotiate with Japan, then maybe the Korean War need not have happened. Or the United States could have just not interfered at all, and eventually Korea would have been, coming out of the communist umbrella once with the fall of the Soviet Union. So think about Vietnam. The Vietnam War had gone on for quite some time before the United States entered, and it was a war between France and the Vietnamese. And the French gave up and the United States took over, and we got kicked out of that country eventually because it was just too much for what reason no one really understood. I mean, the domino theory doesn't really hold much water when so many people were being killed. And now, fast forward to today, Vietnam is an actual trading partner with the United States. It did not require a war for the Vietnamese to begin trading with the United States. It just they started making stuff that Americans wanted to buy. That's it. So, did all those people need to die? Did we need to have all of that PTSD from Vietnam? All of this other kind of stuff. So, otherwise, pretty much as far as I see, most of these conflicts, if not all, are basically adventurism, money-making schemes for the military-industrial complex. I mean, now it seems like war is done for war's sake. Winning is clearly not important because a lot of these conflicts, America never won. Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya. I mean, these places, even if one might dare to argue that, America was quote unquote successful, the countries themselves are much worse off. I mean, if the point of doing the war is to defeat evil and then bring in good so that everyone there, because we care about them, now have a better quality of life, yeah, that is not happening. And that is a serious problem, right? Because then all those people start looking to other countries for help to replace the role of the United States in those countries. And this is a long term, this is just really a bad way of going about things. Now, the way I talk about war, the evils of war, how we get started in war, the fallout, I basically said that every semester in every class when I was teaching in the university. And where I was teaching, you could not teach a class, and you couldn't teach a class uh, that had no military personnel, former or future, in that classroom, right? There was just no way. They used to brag of having the most the largest number of military affiliated students at that university. So there would be former military, children of military, people who are going to join the military after graduation. I once had a class with a former Army guy, Navy guy, Air Force guy, and Marine. Yes, I had four branches of the military represented in the same classroom of 28 students. It was it was hilarious, right? Because they would talk crap to each other in class. It was entertaining. It really was. Uh, but another semester, I had a corpsman who was part of the SEALs, and sitting next to him was a former Special Forces guy, Army guy, and both had been wounded in service. The Army guy was, had just retired. He was in for, I don't know, 30 years maybe. Both had lost lots of friends. And the former SEAL was, he had it was just very recent that he lost a lot of his friends. And so I would do my usual blasting of the wars, and he got really upset at my remarks, and he had to step out of class as a result. And I talked to him afterwards. That particular section was 160 students. But, the Army guy and we tried to talk him down that I'm not blasting the military, but rather the people who sent them. They are the problem. As I said in yesterday's sermon, many military operations today are for corporate interests, right? And if it makes you feel better to cloak the conflict in the flag, Well, okay, that's what you need to do, but it is what it is, right? It is not the fight for freedom. It is not to preserve freedom. It is not to promote freedom, but rather has nothing to do with it at all. And because it has nothing to do with it, the result generally is less freedom for everybody, for people in the United States and in the country where all the violence took place. Now, as a parent, I don't want to send my kid to die for some corporate interest, right? I would rather he not. And as I said yesterday in my sermon, if politicians came clean and explained the exact reason why a conflict was about to be started, whether it's for natural gas or because another country want to use our military, our people to do something for them. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Corporations, if they want something to be done, they can hire mercenaries themselves. They can hire security. And if they die that way, well, that's part of the job. But it's no business of mine. And if a corporation doesn't want to hire mercenaries, well, then they have to talk. Now they have to make negotiations. Now they have to make a product that other people actually want to buy. And if no one wants to buy it, well, there's something wrong with your corporate structure. There's something wrong with how you're producing it. So do better, right? So it's not my responsibility. It's not my children's responsibility to subsidize and support a corporation that really doesn't give two hoots about me. So really, I am extremely pro-military in that I want troops to live and to enjoy life. You know, it's very hard not to be pro-military in this society because it strives very hard, very much, to glorify the military. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to do an episode on Pericles, who was a leading figure in Athens with the start of the Peloponnesian War, the war that it had with Sparta. So, you know, glorification of the military is a time-honored tradition in world history. So, of course, in the United States, that would be true as well. However, wouldn't it be great to have a lean, mean fighting machine that's never used because people are too afraid to fight it, like Sparta, right? They only had, I read back in the day for the lectures I did on Thucydides and the Iliad. They only had 11,000 adult male positions. 11,000, that's it. No more, no less. And so, you know, they had a weeding out system so that the weaker men would just be culled, right? They would just die at a young age through their training process. And so it took a long time to replenish people who would die in a war. And so you don't want people to die in a war. You would rather use intimidation to get your opponents to back down. Then there are sometimes they get deceived, and I talked about that in episode 9, 246 and 250. But people generally, you know, when you have a strong military, people want to use them. So the question then I want to ask is, do we have a strong military? Episode 163, I go into this a bit, but the Ukraine war was fought with U.S. leadership, right? U.S. brass as or strategy, U.S. weapon systems, and they lost. They lost badly. So badly that other countries started sending their soldiers to learn from the Russians, North Korea, and other countries, I am positive, in a less public way, sent people to learn. Because it is very likely that the US might use the military against them one day. Then there was a story that broke over the weekend by the New York Times that the Black Hawk helicopter pilot that crashed into an American Airlines plane in Washington, D.C. in January 29th, earlier this year. 64 people on the plane, American Airlines plane died, and three crewmen from the helicopter died as well. The pilot was a woman. Now, did that matter? Did it matter that she was a captain and her co-pilot was a warrant officer? Right. And I believe the way the ranking system works out, that would be more of like an enlisted man in the army, right? So you got an officer as the pilot and her trainer, uh, person who's walking her through to make sure she stays qualified to fly a Black Hawk helicopter, was a lower rank. Did that matter? Was it any of the other failures that were raised in many of these articles, right? Controlled tower issue, the fact that they had to turn off their, identifying software because they were simulating a covert landing in at night. Was it the fact that she was wearing night vision goggles, or a combination of all of them? But it is symptomatic of a problem within the military that probably exists as a result for a push for equity and diversity. So the priorities in the military was not to create a lean, mean fighting machine, but was to meet quotas, even if people were not necessarily qualified to for the positions that they were occupying. So instead of the natural diversity of finding people who are willing and able to fight very, very well, right, because they come from all different backgrounds, instead they focused on diversity first and hoping that those diverse people can be trained into the best fighting people. And in other words, the military is weak. They fire people who refuse to do the politically correct thing. They promote people who are willing to do the politically correct thing. Trans focus instead of focusing on weapons development and tactics, seeing what's happening in Ukraine with an honest observation, subjectivity, like learning from the fact that US strategy no longer works, especially it doesn't work against a an enemy that has equal technology or better. I have family in the military, and I would rather not test the idea of whether the United States is able to fight or not. But clearly, the signs are there. The Iran's missile attack against Israel, which I spoke about not that long ago, the fact that aircraft carriers don't get too close to missile sites, Iran's counter threat to the U.S. threat of bombing Iran. Iranians would say, well, people in glass houses should not throw stones. And that's because there are many bases, at least 30 bases around Iran with 60,000 personnel, and they're all vulnerable. And so I think about all those lives. Why put them in jeopardy? Why make their family have to mourn them? This takes us to Pete Hegseth. There were leaks of conversations he had on the Signal chat, conversations he should not have had. But then the question is, who leaked them? Now, three people were dismissed from his staff, right? But it turns out that they weren't the leakers. So the people who were dismissed were former military, and they were against unnecessary U.S. military intervention in other countries. And so, as a result of Pete Hegseth encouraging Trump not to bomb Iran or greenlighting Israel's bombing of Iran, there's the fallout part of it was he had to dismiss people from his staff. And the speculation, especially on Judge Napolitano's podcasts among his guests, is that they're trying to get rid of him. Now, there may be good reason to get rid of him, but the fact that he was going to be a voice against blind violence and bombing, then that's a good thing. But it does reveal that people making moves, trying to change the cabinet, trying to change the people that are around Trump so that they are more pro-war, Well, it reveals that the military-industrial complex is dug in like an Alabama tick. All right. So I close this episode with a quote from Sun Tzu's Art of War, chapter 10, line 25. Here it goes. Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. Right? So if you care about the soldiers, then you have to treat them like they are your children, right? You care about them because they're human beings. They have families, right? We should not abuse the power that we or some people have over them, right? They're not there to die, although that is part of the job description. But if they don't have to, especially if it's only for corporate interest, well, then they don't have to, right? It means that the corporation, it should be bankrupt. They should go out of business because they cannot compete on the global market. And I've said we should praise people. Of course, we live in a country that glorifies the military and people who serve in the military. But why not praise people who preserve life? Why not praise people who build things, invent things, create things that are beautiful and functional and long lasting? As or even praise people who bring an end or somehow avoid conflict, right? And as long as there is a possibility to end a conflict, we should seize it. The citizens of the other country who are belligerent, they'll find out soon enough the benefits of peace. So why not, right? So I just wanted to talk about the fact that I am extremely pro-military. I don't want them to die. And also the fact that in the White House, apparently there is a very much big power struggle between people who are pro-war and people who are anti-war. And perhaps, and I did say this before, that it is a possibility that somehow Trump needs to get out from that and to satisfy some of the pro-war warmongers, he needs to make some concessions like bombing Yemen. And the problem I have with that is, of course, the loss of human life. Why not just come on TV or Truth Social and just lay it all out? But of course he can't, because there's also this leverage thing. You need to have stuff or dirt on other people to make them do what you need them to do. But that means you're still playing the game. And that's what I find so disturbing. It won't work. It won't last long. And the next president who comes in can undo all of that, unless, as I said in an earlier episode, he needs to get rid of it all. End the Fed, you know, just close the doors to many, many government organizations, and then maybe we can get back to where we need to. But as I said before, in Trump's mind, we can't do that because we have to bring manufacturing home. We have to keep the dollar weak and all these other things, which of course will just simply make everything worse. And that's it for this episode. I'll talk to you next time.